By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you canceled.
Hello and welcome to Intoxicated Masculinity, where we talk about movies, booze, and anything else that comes up. I'm joined as always by Brandon.
How's it going?
And Kale.
Hello.
Hello.
Today we're just going to do one of our little chit chat sessions. Recently, as some people may be aware, and we'll see when this gets released, Lindsay Ellis was canceled. She's a famous YouTuber, of which I am a fan, and I think Brandon is too. Based on a tweet which was of some dubious cancelable nature. And I don't want to get too much into that specific thing. Lindsay Ellis has covered that very, very extensively in her own YouTube channel. But I've been off Twitter for 8 days after a Twitter ban, which we can talk about later on. And I just want to talk a little bit about social media, Twitter specifically, but we can obviously branch into Facebook if we want to. So I don't know. What are your guys' experience with social media? What do you think? I mean, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I mean, have you had more positive experiences, more negative experiences?
Well, real quick, I had heard she can't deleted her Twitter account. Did she? Did she
Yes,
bring that up?
she deleted her Twitter account.
Probably for the best. There's only so much of that kind of, I don't know, harassment. I don't know what you would call it, but.
Well, it's sort of interesting. And the thing, again, I don't want to get too specific into that one. I'll just cover it kind of service level. But basically, she's now being attacked by a lot of the people sort of more on the left, although I don't even know if they're really on the left. It's sort of the sort of knives out people. I think there's a certain group of people, and this has been my problem with social media, where whenever there's blood in the water, it's like everybody comes the knives out. You know, if a person says something is perceived as being, not right or whatever, I mean, honestly, even that's not, if somebody's being perceived as being weak or being under attack, then it's like everybody goes in the attack at the same time. And it's almost like there's this endorphin rush that people get from attacking other people on social media, especially when they're down.
There's this kind of like we're haunted by this sense of fairness, like, oh, we've got to keep our own side. Maybe not. Maybe just stand by our own side and forgive something dumb they say and then go attack Steven Crowder or something.
Or go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it seems like social media is a double-edged sword, because although it does provide a lot more information, it's more accessible. It may not necessarily be the best information. And a lot of times people use that in malicious ways. For example, the law proposed about basically blanking out your electronic history, because people will come out of the woodwork to attack you if you actually make it big at some point in your life, and then they're going to find all this stuff about you to try to drag you back down.
And well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's and it is a double-edged sword, because on social media, I think we've all had a lot of great interactions with people. We've gotten to know people or gotten to know people's content via social media. But at the same time, there's just this, I feel like there's a tendency towards groupthink. And one thing Ellis says in her video that I thought was kind of interesting is that, especially on the left, and I think people on the left and people on the right sort of come at social media from different perspectives. I mean, obviously do, but I mean, come at it for different reasons and with different intent in mind. So people on the left, I think, are like, we're really, really fond of fairness. Like you mentioned that, like we want this fair play. We want, to sort of stamp out injustice. And I think when taken to, well, a lot of times, like, you don't get to confront a Nazi every day. Like, it's just not that, it's not a common occurrence. And so I think that when you do, like, if you do confront a Nazi, whether it's on social media or in person, you sort of get this endorphin rush. Like, hey, I confronted this person who's a bad person, and I stood up to them. And it's like, when you do that, you get an endorphin rush. Like, it makes you feel good because you feel like you did a good thing. And what do we know about when we get endorphin rushes? We want more of them. And so you go from yelling at, Steven Crowder or Steve Miller or other people named Steve, and you're like, well, that's not doing it for me anymore. Like I need to be better. So it's like you go after people that said, let's say something that was unpopular, or something that was something that was racist once. You know, there was the lady who was got the position at what was it, Teen Vogue, and she made some anti-Asian said some anti-Asian slurs when she was like, I think 16 or 17 years old, and she's now, I think, like in her late 20s, early 30s. And you know, once people found these things, there's a sort of dog pile on her. And you know, whether or not she deserved to get that position at Teen Vogue or not is sort of elementary for my purposes. But it's just people created a villain and then went after that villain.
I think it's the same way we are constantly hold ourselves to this high fairness standard. We also do the same thing with hypocrisy. We on the left just hate hypocrisy, and we think that we can call it out on the right too. We think we can, like, oh, you're being hypocritical. The right doesn't care about that. The right doesn't care about being hypocritical. And I'm not saying we should be like the right, but there's some things we should just drop.
Well, I think
our own side. Worry about hypocrisy on their side.
One thing, another commentator that I watch pretty regularly has said that basically everybody's hypocritical. Now, right. There are certain things that are, I think there are hypocrisies that are things that need to be called out. Your Ted Haggees, you know, if you stay on stage all day preaching about how homosexuality is a sin, and then you're snorting coke off a male prostitute's dick that night, that's some hypocrisy that should probably be called out.
Right.
But you know, if you're somebody who's like a health guru who goes out and eats a chocolate cake at night, I don't give a shit. Who cares? Yeah. You know, it's hypocritical, but it's not affecting my life. It's not affecting anybody else. Who cares?
It's not causing harm,
right,
to others. Being anti-gay, being anti-LGBTQ is causing harm.
I mean, even to give credit to people on the right, if you're a Christian and you look at porn in your spare time, yeah, it's hypocritical, but I don't give a shit. I don't care in the least.
Yeah.
Again, if you are an anti-gay pastor who looks at gay porn on the weekend or during sermons, maybe that's a different story. But I think a certain level of hypocrisy needs to be allowed, because we all have hypocrisy. Every single one of us has at least some level of hypocrisy. Nobody stands up for their beliefs nearly as much as they think they do.
Well, and it's also, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, when it comes to politics specifically, hypocrisy, for example, like when one president comes in and does a thing, then his side is like, yeah, that's cool, but the other side says, no, that's wrong and stupid. But then the next guy comes in and does basically the same thing, and then the roles are reversed.
Well, I think the great example of that is immigration. I mean, Barack Obama was not good on immigration. He was quite bad on immigration. Now, I think Donald Trump was worse on immigration, but well, right, yeah, well, that's part of it. But their policies. I mean, the policies of Barack Obama. Well, even not even George W. Bush was better on immigration than Obama was. But if you take Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden, their immigration policies. Now, obviously, you have some sort of outside the box things, the Muslim ban and stuff like that, which is just crazy. But as far as their basic immigration policies, the policies between Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden just isn't that much different. I mean, there's not vast differences. Right.
To be honest, fairness isn't really a thing we want. We're not being entirely honest there. Like I play Hearthstone. I was showing Sean the same video I showed you, Caleb, the one of my priest deck, and he texted me and goes, "Well, that's just so unfair." And I was like, "Yeah, I wish I could make it more unfair. I want to win as unfairly as possible, and if I could make it more unfair, I would. And then if somebody said, well, what if they do that to you? Then I would demand fairness, because that's what I want it when it's with me. I don't care about when it's around.
People only address injustice when it happens to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big problem. I mean,
I think that's why people don't see themselves in Black Lives Matter protests.
Take somebody like Dick Cheney, for example. I mean, Dick Cheney is bad in virtually every policy way that you can imagine. He's personally a monster. He's professionally a monster. I think he's in his hobby time a monster. He goes fishing. I'm convinced that he beats the fish to death with his bare hands just because he enjoys it. But the one issue in which Dick Cheney is actually halfway decent on is gay rights. Why is that? Because Dick Cheney's daughter's gay.
Yeah.
So in other words, when all of a sudden he's presenting, he's still not great on gay rights, to be fair. He's better than most in his party on gay rights, which isn't saying a lot. But again, it's the problem with, I mean, it's a problem on the left too, but I think it's a more prominent problem on the right of this is only a problem when it affects me. It's sort of a basic selfishness that, I mean, and we're all selfish. That's another thing too. I think you have to admit that, because once you admit that and you realize, then you can watch out for it. Like, am I mad about this thing because I think it's bad for the country, or am I mad about this thing because I think it's bad for my wallet?
And to get back around to the main theme here, social media is a tool for amplifying all of that. You get to put that out there into the world to say, this is my view and you're wrong.
Well, and that's only part one of it. It amplifies it, but then it becomes an echo chamber. You start curating the feeds and the voices that you like and already agree with, and excising everything else. So every time you hear it, everybody in your circle, Facebook is like this. I mean, Facebook to me seems like it has been taken over by the old aunts and uncles. But I mean, that's, they just amplify, and it just goes around. Like, they'll tell, my one aunt will tell my other aunt something, and then they'll tell like 3 or 4 people, like their own kids and all that, and it'll get back to my other aunt, and it just seems like everybody's talking about it. It must be true. Nobody's ever actually looked it up. And those few times when I've linked them to an article showing that that's not true, they get mad at me. But
I am a Young Turks fan. It's a internet news program. And one of the stories Cenk tells is that very much sort of speaks to what you're saying, is that he was talking to his dad about his Facebook page. You know, his dad's this old Turkish guy. And his dad once commented to him how surprised he was how much people like Turkish news. Because when he logs onto Facebook, all he sees is news about Turkey. And it's so, there's something so fundamental about that. Because again, you know, he doesn't understand that there's the algorithms and all this stuff, where of course that's what he's going to see, because that's what he wants to see. And so all as the social media platforms do is continue to show you more things that you want to see. And it makes us all live in this world where we live in the space where everything always agrees with us and everything always tells us that we're the good person, and there's somebody else out there that's the bad person that we have to be fighting. And it's like everybody lives in a fake world.
But and you can do it differently. Like on my Twitter account, I found this website called Media Bias Fact Check, and they had their top 100 unbiased sources. Like, they passed all their fact check backgrounds and all that. And I made an entire news source list based on that. Like, I went into each one of their Twitter feeds and subscribed to that. It's possible to get, nothing's 100%, but it's possible to get mostly unbiased news, but nobody's that interested in it.
But again, it's not something that happens. It's something that you have to do.
Yeah, right.
It requires and again, that's the other thing. I think people sort of call Americans lazy and, you know, and like they don't care about the news. But I think the fact is, Americans we're busy people. You know, I mean, Americans are working more hours than we ever have. We're working more jobs. And so most Americans don't have the fucking time to sit here and sift through all the media that it takes that you would need to do to really be informed on the issues. I mean, look at the way we pick the president. I mean, none of this is on policy. It's all on the perception of policy. You know, I mean, even the way the media reports policy is sort of disjointed. It's all about putting each candidate in their camp, and then saying, okay, you know, Bernie Sanders is the socialist, Elizabeth Warren is the socialist, but not so socialist. Joe Biden is the centrist. You know, and it doesn't really talk about it. The media isn't talking about how these people's policies are going to affect their lives, because most Americans don't have a chance to really understand that, because we live in a country of 350 million people, and every policy, any policy change you do, is going to have an incredible impact on the American people, and it's also incredibly complicated. So it's, and the fact that the elections are basically bought off by, you know, corporate interests and special interests, they like the fact that it's too complicated for the American people to understand. And then so you get on social media and everybody's picked their team, you know, because advertisers have basically told us that, you know, you're about your identity, you know, I am the type of person who has an Apple phone, not an Android phone. And I am the person who would drive, you know, an Audi and not a BMW or whatever, you know. And it's like, I am the person who would vote for a Republican, and I am the type of person who would vote for a Democrat. And so they turn it into an identity. So policy never even fucking comes into it.
You invest self-worth into that identity. And when somebody says, hey, maybe the iPhone's not that good, or maybe something else is just as good, that seems like an attack.
I mean, something as simple as, since I've gotten into computer building, if you talk about the never-ending fight between Intel and AMD, and you sort of have a group of people that are on the AMD side that say that AMD CPUs are the best, and people that say the Intel CPUs are best. What we should be saying is, why are there only two fucking companies that make CPUs in the entire world?
That's a good point. By the way, Tito's cranberry lemonade.
I went with a white lady because we're talking about social media.
I'm finishing off my mead.
I had a thought, sorry, that I wanted to share before we moved on to the next thing. As far as picking your tribe, basically, on say Facebook, for example, for me personally, I can say that I have people on my friends list that are friends that disagree with my views, and I disagree with theirs, but we're still friends, and, you know, we jab at each other a little bit, but we still get along. And then on the other hand, I have family members that I don't even talk to because they hate what I say so much that they won't even talk to me about it. And as far as interesting stories about people's dads, my dad gets on there and he's always posting stuff about pro guns and, you know, no immigrants and all this stuff like that. But you guys have met him before. I mean, he's a reasonable person, but you would never know that if you only looked at his Facebook profile. You would think this guy is a gun-toting, meat-eating, you know, whatever, full-blooded American, not a person that wants to talk things out.
You know what it brings to mind? Do you remember that cartoon? I can't remember if it was Warner Brothers or one of the other ones, where it talks about the guy in the car. How, you know, he's in his house and he gets up in the morning and he kisses his kids and he, you know, he kisses his wife and they have dinner and everything's nice. He's just very smiley. And he gets in his car. And as soon as he's in his car, his expression changes and he's driving down the road. He's like swerving in and out of lanes and he's, you know, not flipping people off because it's a cartoon, but but it's like when you put a certain person in that certain scenario, which in this case, not even a certain person, it's a lot of kind of people in that certain scenario, and they have that, whether it's, I don't know whether it's power exactly, it's like it changes them a little bit. And they're not the person that, you know, they're not the person that they normally are. Because I mean, you see some of the stuff like on Facebook. I'm don't make much of a secret of the fact that I'm a bit of a bourbon enthusiast, and I'm in some of these bourbon groups. And so recently somebody posted something about, and again, it's obviously somebody who's trolling from the left, which I wish they wouldn't do because I don't think it helps anything, but they were asking what kind of bourbon they would recommend to commemorate the death of George Floyd. And you look at the responses and you're like, oh my God, this is the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, just blatantly racist shit. And
because they feel protected. They feel like I have a suit of armor that nobody can get through. You'll
I think
never
that's
find me.
I think that's part of it, but I don't think that's all of it. I think just being in that situation, it changes your mindset, because I don't think that most of those guys would say any of that shit if they were in person, and
Well,
not
I'm
even
competing
not
there,
even from
too.
the perspective of being afraid, but I just don't think they would say something like that in person.
I hope that's true. I hope there are less racists in real life than there are on social media.
Because I mean, there's always the sort of the thing where you have like the 16-year-old who's just saying the N-word because it's edgy, and ooh, I said the N-word, and it's like that I'm not
That's
even
how
really
the
interested in,
kids
because
talk
it's just so
now.
silly. But
All the kids, they're always, "What's up, my? And what you talking about?" And whatever. And then it's like you're not supposed to do that. You're giving that word power by doing that.
but these guys are clearly not 16-year-olds playing Xbox. You know, these guys are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. So there's something else happening. And it's something where you ask yourself, I mean, is this country just like 45% racist assholes?
There's a hidden racism in this country that I don't know will ever stop.
It's not very fucking hidden. At least not anymore, anyway.
But I don't know how much of it is, well, I mean, zero of it's based on science, but I don't know how much of it is even based on any kind of pseudoscience, even like any kind of thing that, because you don't go, this degree of melanin is where we go. No, they're somehow worse. I mean, that's
because
they
racism
don't
is
think of it
taught.
that they just group people by a group, and this group is bad and this group is good just because they're part of that group. And it doesn't matter if they're child molesters or axe murderers, they're part of this group. That makes them good. It's not ever based on any, like, it's why it's kind of another favorite YouTuber. Geez, now that I say it, I can't think of his name, but he did this entire playbook on the alt-right, and his phrase is short, quippy, and wrong. That's what they do in any kind of a debate. You know, it doesn't matter that it's wrong. They'll say something quick and quippy and say it confidently. And while the guy on the left over here is taking 10 minutes to attempt to explain why that's wrong, everybody's dozed off or paying attention to something else. And then a guy just says something confidently short, quippy, and wrong the next moment.
Yeah, it's there's very little in the way of actual discussion or an exchange of ideas. I think the big problem comes in, and I think Trump didn't bring this in, but I think Trump sort of made it apparent, is that when you live in a world where there is no sort of drawback to just lying right off the cuff, then any debate is immediately irrelevant. I mean, if you can just come in and say, no, there's trees flying outside, what are you, fucking stupid? And I mean, you can't argue with that, because it's not true, and there's nowhere to go. There's no debate to be had. Kale, if you and I are debating a topic, and my first line is, well, it's going to be tough to debate Kale because he's killed 1 million children.
I have.
And,
Yeah.
he might deny that, but he would, because he is a convicted felon, liar. And
Baby killers always deny
yeah,
me.
absolutely. Of course, that's what he do. And
You can prove that.
it doesn't matter. Then nothing matters. The facts are irrelevant. And so that's why I think, I don't know. I'm becoming less and less a fan of social media as we go.
Since you bring up the word debate, it makes me think that, and I don't know if this is 100% true or not, I haven't researched it or anything, but supposedly Socrates was quoted as saying, the point of debate is not to win, but to come to an understanding.
Be careful with quotes, because on the internet they're all misattributed.
That's what I'm saying, but it's a good quote either way, even if it's miscredited or whatever. I mean, it's a solid quote to me. It makes sense to me that it shouldn't be about winning. It should be about this is why I'm right, or this is why you're right, and now we both agree on it.
Well, that's not so. In one of my, I think it was my game theory class, and Brandon and I have talked about this offline a bunch of times before. They sort of classify interactions of these three different sort of paradigms. There's debates, games, and fights. So if you're in a debate, your goal is to convince the other person of your arguments. That is ultimately the goal of a debate, or should be. Although if that was being said today, that they would not include that, because debates now are just to tell lies about your opponent. But hypothetically, in the fantasy land of debate, the point is that you will be debating your opponent, and you are either trying to convince them of the merits of your argument or to convince your audience of the merits of your argument. Then there are games. So what is the purpose of a game? You want to defeat your opponent. You want to, in some way, come out ahead, where you reach an end state where you have gained something and they have lost something. And that is a game. And then you have fights. And what is the purpose of a fight? You're just trying to hurt your opponent. There's no winning and there's no convincing. It's just hurting. And that's what most, I think, interactions in social media are. They're all just fights, and fights don't solve anything. Even if you win a fight, which you can't really win a fight exactly, then you've just, you could say, well, I caused more damage to them than they caused to me. And it's like, great. So nothing has been created. No new understandings have been come across. Nobody's learned anything. It's just one person hurt one person more than the other person hurt them. And that's great.
I think and I doubt I can point to anything where I've ever practiced this, but my idea of a debate is to just pull a data, to go to fight for a draw. I want to see about finding the unquestioned assumptions. And I may not convince this. I might not even, in the end, maybe I don't even have a point other than your confidence level in this thing that you believe should probably be lowered. There's an unquestioned assumption somewhere. And if we can ferret that out, then maybe your confidence in what you believe should go down a little bit. Not necessarily saying it should go up for another thing. Saying, like, if I have a jar full of gumdrops, me saying I don't believe it's even is not the same thing as me saying I believe it's odd. It's neither. I'm I don't have one belief one way or the other towards even or odd. So the idea that someone might say, well, if you're either with me or against me kind of mindset, if they say, well, if you don't believe it's even, then it's odd. If you're not a Republican, then you're a Democrat or a socialist or whatever, whatever the label is going to be. And it's not necessarily the case. And maybe it's not even the way we should go about a Facebook debate. I see him getting all fuzzy. I don't know what's happening. Maybe I'm moving too much.
Need to shave.
No. But I don't know.
Hippie.
That's my thought.
Yeah. The problem though is, so I've always, my sort of solution to the debates, games, and fights is always, I would rather have a discussion, because then it takes sort of the pressure off of everything. You're not having a debate. You're just sort of talking, and you can talk about multiple things, and there doesn't have to be an understanding. There doesn't have to be a winner. There doesn't have to be a loser. There doesn't be anything. It's just people talking. And I think in a perfect world, maybe that's a good idea, but I think the problem is the ideas aren't even the point anymore. The identity is the point, because everybody has sort of accreted their own identity, throughout their life, through various advertisements and political slogans. And the ideas aren't important. People don't like Donald Trump because they looked at his policy paper and decided that, well, those policies would probably more benefit my family than his opponent. No, it's because he walks around like he's got a big dick, and he's telling people to go fuck themselves. And I like that, because I'd like to go tell my boss to go fuck himself, but I can't. And so the policies and the ideas are irrelevant. It is the base sort of it's sort of odd because I almost wanted to say selfishness, but in many cases, the policies that they are supporting are harmful to themselves. And so I don't know. I think that
yeah, it's not even that supporting a Republican helps them in any way, except for that temporary embarrassed millionaire belief, that they will someday be rich and all the rules will suddenly not apply to them anymore. And
I don't think they believe that anymore. I think that's something that if you were to go around and poll that, I think even most poor Republicans have started to sort of get wise to that. And it's sort of the crabs in a barrel theory. It's like, no, I can't let that fucker get out of the barrel. He's got to stay in here because I got to stay in here. And I think that's sort of the Republican ideals is like, well, we can't have, public workers getting these benefits if I can't have them. When what they should be saying is, why don't we all strike to get these benefits the public workers have? Because we could have them in a heartbeat.
You do see that sometimes on, my Reddit feed is heavily curated towards things that I like, but you do see that a lot where people will be like, well, if teachers get paid this much, what's next? Garbage men? And the people are like,
yeah,
let's do that.
That's the whole point.
Sounds great.
Have you smelled the garbage? They should get paid more.
Right. They get out there in the cold at like 2 a.m. to take your garbage away.
It's not exactly a market that's drawing, everybody to it. It's like, it's a tough fucking job. And it's probably shitty hours. And it's like, so what are we going to pay like roofers? Like, well, more roofers die every year than cops do.
More loggers die every year than everybody.
Well, I will say this, as on that subject, I had an experience yesterday about that at my work with my boss. And I'm estimating that he probably makes $1 million a year. We'll say, just say he makes $1 million a year.
Okay.
I don't even consider that like super wealthy though, because $1 million isn't that much money anymore. I mean, yeah, it's a lot, but he's not out there like controlling the populace through, the media and political gains and stuff like that. He's just another guy out there doing his job. So I appreciate that about him. And I don't hate him. I mean, I wish I was making the money he does, but I don't think that he's out there being nefarious with it. I think he's just a regular guy who happens to have more money.
It depends on what you mean. There's a difference between like,
I'm talking about the super, super rich that basically just control the media, control the fucking politics. I know that's not conspiracy theory. Now I'm getting all internety. So, but hey, we're talking social media, so let's go down this rabbit hole here for a second.
Well, I'd like to address that. When people talk about controlling the media, unfortunately, it usually goes towards one place that is not great.
It's huge corporations.
Well, the thing is, it's not even huge. I mean, it is, but here's the thing. There was a quote. I think it was Gore Vidal, who said basically that the CEO of the New York Times and the CEO of General Motors are going to be basically the same person. In other words, you have companies that have vastly different interests, do vastly different jobs, and yet their CEOs are going to be the same people. Now, it's not to say their CEOs are colluding. That's where I think there's a bit of a disconnect. It's not like there's some smoke-filled room where every CEO gets together and makes the laws. It's that all the CEOs got rich and famous under the current political system and the current economic system that we have. And so what they want, I mean, all the policies aside, their basic goal is for everything to basically stay the same, because they got rich and famous the way it is now, and they would much like it to just stay the same as, I mean, they call it the establishment for a reason. And it doesn't have to be a conspiracy theory. It's just they all kind of believe the same things and they all give money to politicians. And so whether or not you're a right-wing Republican or an establishment Democrat, you're pretty much, you want things to just kind of maybe change a little bit. Maybe we increase the minimum wage by $1.50.
I feel like I totally get what you're saying there. And I think it's like you said, it really nailed it down to say that it's the establishment. It doesn't matter if they're right or left. They've established themselves. They have so much money and such status, basically, in the social hierarchy, that they like it that way. And they will move up if they need to, but they definitely don't want to go back down. And I feel like that's probably why they don't want regular people to be able to have powers like unions and things like that. Because God forbid you let somebody actually stand up for themselves and like make their life better.
Well,
I mean, if the establishment represents one thing, it's inertia.
on a side note, there's a difference between your boss and the capitalist, the owner of the means of production. Your boss is just your boss. It doesn't matter how much money he makes. He is still a worker. He's still a proletariat unless he owns the means of production. Those are the people that are exploiting the workers.
He's a middleman, basically.
Yeah, it doesn't matter that he makes $1 million. He's well off, but it isn't him that is exploiting the workers. He is aiding the people that are exploiting the workers, but it isn't him that's doing it.
Some might
not
call that a
related
class trader.
Do you think that it would be
class traders, but
it would be true that if there were no billionaires, that we would have a lot more millionaires?
I mean,
we don't really need millionaires either, but
well, I'm just talking about, spreading the wealth, basically. I don't know the
yeah.
exact.
I mean, remember, so one of the things that I studied when I was in college was income tax policy. And how income tax policy has changed over the years. We used to actually tax millionaires and billionaires. And the problem is now they say, oh, if you tax a billionaire, then all of a sudden they'll just stop making money. That if you're like, it's the same with like the oil companies, that if we don't give them subsidies, that they'll stop drilling for oil.
No,
that
they
they'll
moved their
only be
headquarters
that they'll all of a
offshore.
sudden only be the 10th most profitable company in the world. I mean, that's where all this ludicrous stuff comes in. It's like, oh, you're going to spook these job creators. And it's like, no, you won't. Because if you own a business, you don't give a shit about Washington policy. What you give a shit about is, am I growing as a business? Which we could talk about whether growth is something that's healthy to really do in the first place. But is my business growing? Do I need to hire more people? I mean, that's the basic problem with trickle down economics. Is if I own a business and all of a sudden I get an extra $10,000 or $50,000 in taxes, am I just going to say, well, I got more taxes, so I should hire somebody? No, that's not. If you own a business, it's not how you make the determination about whether to hire somebody. You make the determination to hire somebody if you are doing more business and need to hire somebody. I mean, that's how business works. I mean, if you were to walk around any major company, big box retailer, whether it's your Walmart, your Targets, your Best Buys, whatever. If you were to walk around that same retail store 25 years ago, you would have walked in and talked to an employee almost immediately. Now you walk in that same store and you could be standing there for 20, 30 minutes before anybody even notices you're there. Why is that? Because businesses are always trying to reduce their costs. And the only cost that as a business, if I'm in a manufacturing business, I can't change the cost of how much it costs to buy my raw materials, my coal, my iron, my steel, whatever. These are all just, those are set costs that these businesses are going to charge me. The one thing I can do is I can say, well, instead of having 50 people on this crew, let's have 48 and I'll save some money and I'll just work them a little bit harder.
Yeah. So
the one thing you can, so these policy, the idea that tax policy is going to affect employment is ludicrous. It's a fantasy.
Another side note, job creator is a Luntsian, Lovecraftian word. Jobs are created by demand, and demand is created by majority of people. There's no one guy that's just like, I'm gonna make the economy.
Demand is created by economic capacity in the middle class.
By the way, your Knob Creek there, I just saw the KNO and it makes it look like you're on the radio. Like you've got the radio call sign right there.
This is Mike at KNOB and we're getting drunk.
You're on the knob.
With Fat Man and the Baby.
I don't think that would pass muster. No, but it is. I mean, that's the thing that we've been destroying in this country, and we're a little bit off the beaten path of of social media, but this is a chit chat show, so we can talk about anything we want, including being on the knob.
A-N-O-B.
I mean, the middle class, I mean, if you look at this country throughout the after World War II, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, the middle class is one of the big reasons why we were able to, have this, why the country was as prosperous as it was. Because the thing is, let's say, take $1 million, give it to one person. What happens?
They spend it.
Well, maybe, probably not. They usually don't. They'll invest it or they'll save it.
I would spend it.
But even if they spend it, they take a while to spend it. They're not going to spend it tomorrow. They're going to spend it over the next, year or a couple of months if they're really, really spendy. But let's say you have 10 people, $100,000. Let's say you have 10 poor people, $100,000. How fucking fast is that $100,000 going to be out the door? Because they're going to pay off their house. They're going to pay off their car. They're probably going to put some of it in their bank account, so it won't be perfect, but that money will go out much faster. Now give 100 poor people $10,000 a piece. That money is going to be spent in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So in other words, when you now there's diminishing returns. So if you give 1 million people $1 a piece, it's probably not going to have much of an economic impact because you're giving people $1 and they're just going to put it in their pocket or whatever. But there is merit in redistribution, because it's also where are they going to spend it on? So let's say you're a millionaire and you get another $1 million. You're going to buy another yacht. You're going to buy another house. But if you give that money to poor people, they're going to go to grocery stores. They're going to go to other things in their local community that's going to keep the money flowing around.
Well, I think the bigger point you're trying to get to is rich people reinvest their money to make more money.
Well, that's something that I've sort of been coming to terms with. I've been investing a little bit of money, a very little bit of money recently. And I'll check my evil. Well, it doesn't, but it makes me uncomfortable because I look at my little apps every day, and like today, in my little account thing, I made $11. I didn't do anything. There's just $11 that was created.
How much did Jeff Bezos make today?
I'm guessing slightly more than $11.
11 million.
If Jeff Bezos made $1 million, I would be amazed, because that would be a remarkably slow day for him.
Like a minute.
But no, so you look at I look at my little app and I made $11, and that's just $11 came out of nowhere, and it feels really weird. It's the idea that you can use your money to make more money. And in fact, if you have enough money, you can make enough money to never do anything and just have your money make money for you.
Those are the worst kind of people.
Well, it's not even the people. I mean, that's where. So I think I'm
I'm
not so much yelling about the individual billionaires. Like, I'm not pointing one billionaire and saying we should go and take his house away or something. It's just the existence of billionaires, the fact that the country allows one person to amass that amount of wealth. And to all the libertarians, remember, those paper things we carry around in our wallet, that's government property. We don't have to let people keep that. We can take it back. That's government property.
And due to inflation, it's not actually worth what it says on the paper.
But so no, there shouldn't be billionaires.
There shouldn't be any,
because it's not, the money isn't serving the people. And I mean, I think if there's one problem we have in this country above anything else, is that the people of this country are at best the third or fourth biggest priority. I mean, we need to keep the economy growing. We're never quite sure why we need to keep the economy growing, but that's what they tell us. The economy has to keep growing, and that's really important.
So that rich people can get rich.
How does anything keep growing when we have limited resources? I mean, eventually that reaches an end.
Because it's a finite system.
Well, I'm not going to get into that, but I think the desire for infinite growth is certainly a fantasy. I mean, all profits are short term. But the point is, we should be considering the welfare of the human beings that make up this country, because that's what a country is. It's people.
It's the only thing I care about. If somebody says, like, do you care about the USA? Not particularly. I mean, if you mean the people, yeah. If you mean the land it's on, yeah, I care about that. If you mean the flag or the song or whatever, I don't really give a shit. If you mean the borders, I don't really give a shit.
The people are the country.
Yeah. I don't care who comes in. Honestly, I'm open to open borders. I'm open to world voting. As long as we're going to be an empire, I think the rest of the people should have a say in who leads us.
That leads me to
Brandon's campaign for president is not going to go well. I'm just gonna say that right now.
I feel like the whole thing we're focusing on the economy and this politician and that politician, and people forget that the people are the country, and so the government and whatnot is supposed to work for the people, not tell us this is what we're doing. They're not my boss. They're public servants. They're supposed to work for us.
You know,
that phrase, they put them on pedestals and say, well, that guy said to do this, so that's what I got to do now.
That phrase is not my boss is also interesting. I think we ought to bring democracy into the workplace. Yeah.
Well, I'm in favor of
term limits on
it. 100% unionization. Everybody should be unionized. In fact, I mean, the stuff that Amazon was doing down in Alabama, I mean, that in any sane country, what Amazon was doing would be criminal. And those managers would be put in shackles and carried off to prison. Yeah. I mean, they're lying to their employees and telling them a bunch of, BS that isn't true about what I mean, the reason we have the protections that we have, that shit didn't come the fuck out of nowhere. That's what really frustrates me, I think, on the right more than anything else. It's like all these things we have, the 5-day work week, weekends, we don't have paid time off.
40 hours vacation.
40 hours. I mean, vacation we don't have guaranteed, but breaks, things like that. All this exists because of unions. Corporations didn't just come down and say like, you know what, maybe we shouldn't make them work 7 days a week. Maybe we should only make them work 5. It's like, no.
Maybe she'd have to be 18 before you do a full-time job.
Right. I mean, I'll tell you what, as a book recommendation for the viewers, The Jungle is one of the most eye-opening books I've ever read. And it is not a pleasant read, but it's an important one, I think.
So we need unions and we need to tax the rich.
We need to eliminate.
Well, I mean, that's a start.
It's the only thing I still agree with Anne Rand about. We could take all the rich and put them on an island in the ocean. That's fine. Preferably a sinking one, but.
Well, I don't hate because they are humans. They are other people. And we just need to remind them of that you're a person in part of this group. You are not above everything else. You don't get a different set of rules.
Yes, they do.
Well, I think if you put 25 billionaires out on an island, you didn't give them any servants or anything, I think they'd start to realize their place in the world fairly quickly. I want to see Jeff Bezos trying to construct a fucking house out of a bunch of palm fronds.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be active volcano, but still.
No, I think that's one of the things. I mean, I think that a lot of billionaires are billionaires because they committed immoral acts. I
don't think you can be a billionaire without being immoral.
I think you can make a strong argument for that. I don't know if I would make that necessarily, but there is a strong argument to be made there. Like Bill Gates, for example, Bill Gates is all of a sudden the good guy because we all just decided to forget that he stole every idea he ever had, and that's the only reason he's famous.
Unless you're on the right.
He wasn't a good computer program. He wasn't a good man. All he did is he stole his ideas.
He stole Windows.
Steve Jobs. I mean, Steve Wozniak is the person who basically designed all this stuff. But Steve Wozniak wasn't an egomaniacal asshole. Sorry to speak of the dead, but Steve Jobs was an asshole. And he stole a lot of the stuff he got too.
For every dollar in profit is a dollar that some worker didn't get paid.
Well, right. No, but I'm just starting off with the actual people themselves. And Steve Jobs and Bill Gates are two people that are kind of lionized in American culture. And both of them are incredibly immoral people. I mean,
what are some other topics in social media that are buzzing around right now? How about the vaccine?
Well, I'll tell you what.
Off of politics from social media, but it's tangentially related anyway, is conspiracy theory. You kind of brought it up earlier, but conspiracy theory is one of those things that is so dangerous because every evidence against the theory becomes evidence for the conspiracy. and there's just no good way to ferret that out, and to just, I don't know how you deprogram somebody from
Well,
being.
I think the
Gamma.
problem with conspiracy theories is you can't logic somebody out of that. You can't explain to somebody why a conspiracy theory is wrong.
Right.
I mean, I think I don't know. As much as I am not a Christian, I hear the Jesus guy was pretty good. And one of the ways Jesus always taught people was by telling people stories and sort of giving them these sort of kind of concrete examples through kind of like fables and things like that. And I think that's how you have to talk to people. I think trying to present them, a bunch of evidence, trying to present a bunch of evidence and things like that just isn't gonna, it's not gonna help them. It's not gonna convince them of anything. So I think you have to, I don't know. It's tough. It's a truly tough nut to crack. I think one of the problems is people see somebody in their community who is rich. So I remember talking to a guy that I used to work with about that. He was talking about his stepfather, who is worth like maybe $300,000 or $400,000. So like, I mean, I don't even know if you call that rich anymore. I would call it, well off, but not like rich. But again, in his mind, because he grew up fairly poor, and the idea of somebody having, $300,000 in his world, that guy is like the most powerful person. He's like the fucking, the cartel guy in Mexico who owns like this huge compound and everything. But in the grand scheme of things, that guy couldn't get a meeting with his senator, because he couldn't donate enough money to matter. And so there's this perception from a lot of people where they don't really understand what the real elite in this country are, and how they're not homogeneous as far as they sit in smoke-filled rooms. They're just homogeneous in the fact that they just kind of want everything to stay the same, which I think I hit on before, but I think it's important. If you can show people, look, it's not about people planning out anything. It's just about people wanting inertia.
On a side note, explaining things, I think people need to stop with the analogies. Be more direct. Say the thing. I think a lot of the times people attempt an analogy and end up confusing matters worse because we don't share the same experiences exactly.
I disagree a little bit, because I think when you try to explain things directly, then it's a matter of getting into sort of logicking out a conspiracy theory. And I just don't think it's possible. If somebody believes that there is a basement to a pizza parlor in New York City where they traffic, children for politicians.
Right. But
then telling them there's no basement there isn't going to help, because they hit it, obviously.
Right. I understand. And maybe it doesn't apply to conspiracy theories, but generally speaking, analogies, just people focus on that analogy. If you got something wrong on that analogy, they'll go off on that direction. And a lot of the times the person doesn't quite get it right in the first place. Sorry, Cale, I feel like you haven't talked much on this, and you're more directly involved with people who believe in conspiracy theories. So if you want to go ahead and.
Well, I was going to say two things, but now I'll say three things since you bring that up. One, as far as the Jesus thing goes, I see what your point is, and I feel that that's because wisdom and compassion are kind of a universal human thing. I think that it's ingrained in our DNA to try to share knowledge and to try to help others. So I think if you're not doing that, you're not doing it on purpose, and that makes you kind of a shitty person. Is that direct enough for you? And as far as conspiracy theories go, I forgot what the second thing was, so I'm just going to skip to that. On a personal basis,
it was the Department of Energy.
Rick
Perry joke.
Mike kind of knows, and Brandon, you definitely know someone who his first name starts with a T, and he believes that the Earth is flat. And we've had this debate.
Wait, it isn't?
Time and time again. And no matter what you say to him, and I mean, like, I'm not even quoting anything. I'm not pulling up anything off the internet that I researched. I just know some stuff from, you know, the science classes that I've taken in my life, and documentaries, and, you know, just like videos from NASA and stuff like that, that I know that space is a vacuum and the earth has mass, which makes gravity. Gravity in a vacuum coalesces to a single point. And when there's a vacuum, that gravity basically forms a general sphere shape of material and matter.
Oh yeah, if
And
space
that's
is a
how the
vacuum,
Earth
then
works.
where's the bag?
But
Smarty
is that
pants.
more rational than thinking that somebody built a big disc thing to put us on and, like, I don't know, watch us because we're so freaking exciting?
Yeah,
Because
some of it is much harder. Like the
in the
conspiracy flat Earth.
vastness of the entire universe, that one thing, sorry God, but is so focused on us. I mean, how arrogant is that? Come
Well,
on.
the
Well,
conspiracy
arrogance is kind of our thing.
the conspiracy itself is much harder than it just not being real. Like this
But
entire
I
cabal of
disagree.
scientists and people,
In a matter of
thousands of people
seconds,
for
how the
years.
Earth actually was formed and shaped, and that's why it's round. And then it's just like, no, no, no. I've got this very complex string of other things I'm going to say about why that's wrong. And no, you don't. Just stop. Just stop. And that's to your point, Brandon. There's no point. There is no point in debating it with them because they'll never change their mind. So let them be.
Well,
I
I'll
guess
tell
you
you,
do them a favor by just letting them live their happy little stupid life and move on with your own.
we should put that on a poster.
Another friend of mine
Hey,
once
well,
said,
I wanted to mention one thing. Well, two things actually. First of all, I think that one thing that is important to do when you're talking to people who are believing unreasonable things, find the unreasonable things they believe that are harmful. So let's say, for example, you're like me and you believe that the San Francisco 49ers is the best professional football team in the country. That is an unreasonable thing to believe, but it's not really harmful. So who gives a shit? And
San Diego
again, but
or Los Angeles now. Sorry.
I think that's part of the problem is that people, so you can do that. So I can think that the 49ers is the best team. And whether or not that's true or not, it really doesn't matter in the real world. I can believe that unreasonable thing and it's fine.
But you know they're not.
Kale, they are. I mean,
I know that the Chargers aren't the best team, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with them not being the best.
Clearly you've never heard of Steve Young and Joe Montana, so I'll just end this discussion. But
Okay,
so once you've identified the unreasonable beliefs, sort of parse out the harmful ones, and then I think you kind of have to work on those.
there is sometimes where the answer is simple. Kale, remember one time you sent a picture, it looked like spaceships flying around the moon, I think it was.
Yeah, that kind of stuff intrigues me. I'm more apt to be triggered by that kind of video, I guess.
Do you know who Phil Plait is? He's an astronomer and skeptic. And I looked it up and he happened to have a little take on it. And he was like, here's the reasons why it couldn't be and all this. But he goes, but the main thing is there are thousands of people on the earth staring at the moon every day. And they didn't see it.
Yeah.
Well, I have a suggestion. So something that I've gotten into a lot recently is like film conspiracy theories. Probably the most famous of which you should all check out. And there's a couple of people that have done this. Just get on YouTube and you find it. The Pixar theory. So there's people that
it's all the same universe.
It's all the same universe. And they go through painstaking detail to try and make this fucking bananas theory work, where all the Pixar movies are in one universe. There's, I think, multiple apocalypses. And it is brilliant because it doesn't matter if it's true or not.
Right. It's for fun.
using all your conspiracy theory like muscles in your brain on something that is dumb and hilarious and brilliant at the same time.
And you haven't taken somebody from that conspiracy theory and made them president.
Right. And so I think doing stuff like that is a good so there's a YouTube channel called Film Theories, which I watch sometimes. And they do that with a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot of just crazy conspiracy theories in films that they'll work out. And it's really fun because it doesn't matter. And they know it doesn't matter. I mean, they're very, sort of out front about the fact that they're doing these conspiracy theories. But you get, because conspiracy theories, like I get it. I sort of get where the fun is, that you're like, oh, it's all a big thing. And it's like you're telling a story, Unfortunately, you're telling a story that is damaging to the world. So like maybe if we could shift those people over into, trying to parse how Soul fits into the one Pixar theory.
I miss when COVID-19 was a hoax.
Yeah, tell that to 500,000 people. But I really think that's true. I think the idea of sort of stretching those muscles on something that's goofy is kind of fun, and I sort of get that fascination a little bit, but not about not getting a vaccine.
Get your vaccine.
Yeah.
So I think honestly, when you brought up the one person,
get your vaccine.
the one of our friends, I think that the Earth is flat. I don't know. He's probably not going to go shoot anybody about it. So
no. Although he could now because it's way easier to get a gun than it is to go vote.
But one example. So I think sometimes you can explain this to people. So I was talking to somebody who is a friend of ours with very sharp pants. We were driving somewhere and we were talking about the Middle East. And if you know this person, it would be odd for him to bring that up, but yeah.
It's already like, oh boy.
But it's like, I think it might've been, we were in a drive down towards southern area. Anyways, but we were in the car for a long time and like, fuck it, I'm game. Because I don't feel like this person is a villain. Like, I feel like he wants to be right. He wants to be decent. And so I explained it to him, and we, over the course of about, 2.5, 3 hours, like I went through the history as I understand. I've got a little bit of a background in Middle East history, plus I was there. When you really explain it to, when I explained it to him in a way that kind of made sense to him, I kind of got an oh yeah moment from him. He's like, oh yeah, I sort of get why they'd be upset. And I was like, win.
What's special about him though is that person is almost unique in their ability to admit when they're wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
I have another friend, you guys know him, who is telling me.
By the way, we have to get him on this podcast at some point.
But he's telling me about like how I should do my own research, which is another one of those phrases that conspiracy theorists love.
Honestly, I almost wonder if do your own research should be its own show. Because it
probably should.
It is a
it should go on the topic sheet.
It's such a weird thing to say.
It doesn't
bro.
I think people like a thing they can just say as like the power of Christ compels you. Like you're just like it's your thing you just throw up when the vampires come out. There's like, do your own research.
It's
power of Christ impales you.
It's why I always want to write the Brandon's Big Guide of Being Right most of the time. You just take whatever your question is, figure out who the experts are, and then go with the majority consensus. Because those people spent a lot of time with their butts in a chair learning about something and then coming to that consensus.
And also, they're not fucking rich.
Right. Well, but it's a lot of people, all very smart, all very knowledgeable in that specific subject, all saying the same thing. If all you have is one guy, it doesn't matter how smart that guy is. If it's just one guy, you don't have consensus. you have possibly a crackpot,
But
because
the
there
one
are
thing-
crazy.
But the beauty of America is that the one individual can be just as important as the group.
But he can't be just as right as the group.
But the one thing some people on the conspiracy theory thing will say is that, oh, they must be paid off. That's why I say all those people that are making these determinations drive Toyota Yaris's. They live in 1-bedroom apartments.
But what is more likely?
These are
that one
not
person is
wealthy
paid off,
people.
or thousands of people are paid off and keeping it secret?
More than thousands. It'd be like millions of people are being paid off. I mean,
Or
are they
that
just
one guy
giving...
is wrong on YouTube, or the consensus of climate scientists are right and climate change is a real thing?
It's just all George
One guy on YouTube,
Soros giving out like 1998 Honda Preludes.
Yeah. My one of my cousins
take one of
believes
those.
that Soros is like the grand master of the left who orchestrates whatever it is they think he's orchestrating on the left. And it's like, outside of your conspiracy theory, I never even heard of the guy. Like, outside of right-wing people talking about him, I don't know who he is. He's a rich guy. That's all I know. And if he's a billionaire, then he's already immoral. He doesn't even count for me.
What about
Typical
Robert Reed?
left-wing socialist is a billionaire hedge fund manager.
Right.
But
Well, he would know.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said, what about Robert Reich or Reek or however you say his name?
He's just an economist.
Yeah,
He's not
He's
that
got a-
rich. He's also very small. He's a very small person.
he does say a lot of pretty interesting things, though.
Robert Reich, I don't know. I have sort of mixed feelings towards him. I think he's a good guy. He's pretty progressive. But I feel like, and this will be the conspiracy theorist to me coming in, not even conspiracy theorist, but like, I'm always a little bit nervous about the people that are just a little too close to power all the time. And Robert Reich has been fairly close to power, like more than I'm comfortable with. I don't think he's wrong. I don't think he's lying or anything. I just feel like it's sort of like him and Paul Krugman. Paul Krugman's probably a better example in that direction of somebody who's like,
So you're saying he's kind of guilty by association?
no, it's again, it's sort of a more a sin of Brandon, you'll know the sins where a sin where you just don't mention it.
Omission.
Omission?
Sin of omission. Right. And I think that's what people like Paul Krugman and Robert Reich are more guilty of. It's not like they don't, and they probably believe it. I don't think they're necessarily dishonest people. I just think, it's the poll. I mean, one thing that we could talk about is AOC over the last little bit, and whether or not we're canceling AOC.
What is her deal? 'Cause
Which
I
we're
don't
not
know what-
canceling AOC. Shut up.
I don't know what goes on with her, because it's like one time, like someday it's like I don't hear anything about her, and then I'm like thinking, okay, well, people like her, she's doing good, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're going after her, and I'm like, what the hell did she even do?
Well, it's complicated. I mean, that's the problem with most of the stuff in the world is it's complicated and hard to understand. So there is the perception of some people on the left that AOC has sort of surrendered in some ways and is now kind of towing the party line. And there is evidence to that effect. I don't know if there's enough there for me to really say one way or the other. I don't know. People, and this gets back to the social media thing. On social media, everybody is so reactionary. It's just like, I see a thing and I'm going to post 40 tweets about how everybody's evil and I'm the one pure person in the world. So is AOC becoming a little softer on some issues than I'm comfortable with? Yeah, I think so. But I don't think she has joined the conspiracy to destroy America or anything like that. I think it's one of those things. I mean, you're not in those sort of houses of power where there is incredible pressure, because remember, to get elected, you have to raise a lot of money. And I think when Nancy Pelosi is putting pressure on you, which I'm sure she is every day, and Nancy Pelosi is one of the richest representatives in the country, it's tough to keep your principles.
I think it's inevitable. Like power is like radioactive. You the closer you get, the weaker you become. I don't.
I want to say just quick interjection here. Since you brought that up, it made me even more so want to say this, that I feel like just in general public and in conversations in my everyday life, it feels like a lot of people don't understand the definition of what makes a progressive. They think that all Democrats are progressive. And I'm like, no, they're not. Don't say Joe Biden is a progressive, because he's not a progressive. He's not a socialist. He's not a fucking progressive. He's establishment. And then
Well, I think
I
the
hate
problem
that
with
argument.
the problem with stuff like that is definitions are hard. And I mean, all words mean what we've decided they mean. I mean, there isn't some sort of a set determined. I mean, libertarian, for example.
There's not a
Libertarian is probably
platonic
one of the
idea.
weirdest ones, because libertarian is just, it's kind of a, if you were a libertarian somewhere else, you would believe completely different things than if you were a libertarian here in the United States.
Or a couple hundred years ago.
Right.
And this all relates to social media.
It does, obviously, because libertarians going to social media. But so progressive, like, what's a progressive? I don't know. I mean, do you like hold up a picture and like a progressive looks like this? I don't know. I am a pragmatist. I'm a pragmatist over everything else. So if Joe Manchin would help me get the $15 minimum wage passed, which he isn't, but if he did, and Ilhan Omar, somebody I agree with a great deal, didn't, then I would be more on the side of Joe Manchin than Ilhan Omar in that particular case.
I would say
there's a famous quote about the United States. And it was I'll have to look up, see who actually said it, but it was, the United States doesn't have friends, the United States has interests. And I feel like in an attempt to be a friend to the working class,
that wasn't Vonnegut.
I don't have friends, I have interests. And so I will side with whoever is doing the best for the workers in this country at whatever particular moment we live in.
So you take what you get.
Yeah. Well, you take the good and you take the bad,
never going to be the perfect,
and then you get the facts of life.
Well, honestly, one of the most corrosive ideas is this idea of absolute. People look for it in science. They look for it in conspiracy theories. They're looking for it in the philosophy of morality. This idea of an absolute standard, this platonic ideal, it just doesn't exist. Nobody's going to be 100% the thing you want. You just go with the person that'll get you closest. You take, like me personally, I take human flourishing, human well-being as my goal, my end goal. And whatever gets me,
what are you, some kind of humanist?
Yeah. And whatever gets me closest to that is what I want. If I find two things that are nearly the same in getting me close to something, I'll find if this one has other bad side effects or whatever, but that's what I'm interested in.
Well, that's where, so Joe Manchin, I think Joe Manchin is an interesting figure, a often infuriating figure, maybe a bad guy. But I'll tell you what, if Joe Manchin votes the right way, I'm on his side 100%.
For that.
That's what I'm saying. That's my point.
Yeah.
So again, if Joe Manchin is in favor of something, and Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, which I can't imagine. Rashida Tlaib's like my favorite representative. It's awesome. Not my representative, because she says fuck sometimes, which is like, you got my vote.
Well, and we're stuck with the people.
Let's not even fucking go there. Representative and senators, we're just fucked. We're in a barrel of fucked.
Is okay. I'm sorry. Just quick interjection here. Do you think that Congress and the Senate probably have a lot more flex than any other section of the politics?
I think that the Senate is basically Did I get frozen?
No.
Oh. Well, fuck you. I think the Senate is a basically undemocratic body and should probably be abolished.
Yes.
Remember, so in California, which I know people out here in the Midwest love to shit on California. I've been, it's quite nice. Really, it's
think I did poop there
very
once.
nice. It's gorgeous. There's it's great weather. It's really like, for all the people who hate California, go there. You'll love it. It really is very nice.
San
The
Diego.
traffic you won't like. I'm not gonna lie. Traffic you're gonna hate. The rest of it, it's really quite nice. But so California has 40 million people. They have 2 senators. Wyoming has 650,000 people. They also have 2 senators. That's wrong. That's bad. That's a bad thing for democracy. 650,000 people in Wyoming should not have the same power as 40 million people in California.
It should be like schools, where like if a school's class A, 1A, 2A, 3, so on and so forth, is
It should be
based
like a
on
democracy.
population. It's based on population. The more population you have, the more representation you have.
Well, and the 3 branches of government are supposed to be the things balancing each other out. You're not supposed to be balancing out one branch against itself. The other 2 don't do that. The executive and the judicial aren't, constantly at odds with itself.
But
They're
I feel like
balancing out
that's-
the other 2.
Well, the
That's
judicial
a
branch
separate
kind of
thing.
is, but
I mean,
not as much as it should be.
People want to say it's like the 3-legged stool, but it's not really a 3-legged stool anymore. It's a 3-legged stool with a great big tabletop sitting on top of it, and the weights all dispersed the wrong way.
Well, it's a 3-legged stool where one of the legs is made entirely of money.
And evil.
And I mean, the judicial branch is corrupt too, because it's one of those things where corruption is kind of a seeping thing. So once you have corruption seep into the executive branch and the legislative branch, it's going to seep into the judicial branch as well, because
So it's like a
the
virus?
president nominates the justices, and the Senate confirms. So the thing is, and we've known this for a long time, and John Roberts, I think, the Supreme Court justice, or Supreme Court justice, is sort of attempting to qualify that the judicial branch is a valid sort of branch in the government. But all evidence shows it really isn't. I mean, at this point, all the justices who vote for, or who are nominated by Republicans, vote for whatever the Republicans want, and the justices nominated by the Democrats vote for whatever the Democrats want. It's just another arm of the parties.
It's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be an independent, adjudicative body, but it isn't. That's a fantasy. It's not.
Then again, a famous banker once said, "Give me the means to produce and control the country's wealth, and I care not who makes their laws."
Well,
Rothschild.
Did you just bring in the Jewish question?
No. What? No, I'm just saying banks in general. That's also a company that makes lots of money off of regular working folks.
well, banking's kind of an interesting, because, Alexander Hamilton would have wanted a national United States bank.
That would make
But
more sense.
the right wingers at the time absolutely despised the idea.
I'm a globalist.
Jefferson said that banks were as dangerous to a free republic as standing armies, which he's sort of right, but you have to have yours. Like, you're going to have banks. Banks are going to come out. That's just, every society's had banks.
Why do we have so many? There's one
Because-
popping up on a corner every day.
I'd be interested to see how many there actually are, as far as how many people actually own them.
Well, I think you got Citi, Bank of America, Chase, and what
Wells
am I missing?
Fargo.
Well, yeah, Wells Fargo's not one of the big ones, but it's big. Wells Fargo, Citi, Chase, Capital One, kind of American Express. Yeah, there's not very many. Banks are dangerous things. Banks are dangerous things for an economy. We could get into Glass-Steagall, but that's that's a whole nother discussion. Glass-Steagall, we could do a whole show on
If you have
Glass-Steagall.
enough money in the
Usury is a
bank,
dangerous thing.
you just keep making more money and you don't have to worry about it.
Human beings are dangerous things,
I know shit.
especially when they get on social media.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we've talked for quite a bit. We should probably
Wrap this up.
kind of close out. I don't know. I wanted to ask this at the beginning, but maybe it's good to hold this at the end. What do you guys? Can you pick out one or two? Well, let's start off with this. What's a good interaction you've had on social media? Like some of you say were like, oh, that was good that we sort of got into that, or there was a good resolution to it, or something like that.
Well, I mean, there's little. I know it sounds like a little thing, but I'm terrible at remembering birthdays. I'm happy that Facebook. That's the only reason I even get on Facebook anymore, is just so I can remember birthdays. But
it's funny knowing you. I should have known that was the first thing you'd say, because honestly, that was almost the first thing I was going to say.
Well, you said one or two things. It's that, and it's slightly related. There's a bunch of community stuff that is sometimes good to know too, like community donations. We just had this big citywide donation for the fireworks thing, and they did a really, like, a bunch of people got nominated. My wife was one of them, and
humble brag.
You got like ups and down votes and stuff like that, and whoever won got a pie in the face. So
that's the reward,
right?
That's
They're
a shitty
attempting
reward.
The reward is a better fireworks display for the 4th of July, but
I have one that's not.
I guess it's better than a firework in the face.
I guess since you put it in that kind of light, I'll say that I have a friends, and one of their children recently passed away due to an accident, and a bunch of people came together on Facebook, way more people than I would have expected, honestly. It's kind of one of those heartwarming stories that you'd see on the news or something. And a bunch of people came together and put together a bunch of money through different charity ideas and stuff, so for them to cover the cost of the funeral and stuff. And they put out a lot of basically memorabilia for the child. People, came to their doors with like art projects and just like, hey, we made a bunch of these and we're selling these items to raise money for you guys and stuff like that. And it was really one of those things, because you see so much stuff on Facebook that's just, it either doesn't mean anything or it just pisses you off. And then it's nice once in a while to come across a real life story of some people that you actually know that actually had some good happen because of it.
I think the idea of community is something that it kind of been in flux, especially since the internet age. And it is nice to every so often see that work to the positive, because it so often works to the negative.
Maybe this goes on the topic page. Should funeral costs be free at the point of use?
Well, I mean, if you're asking me, yes, obviously.
Paid for by taxes?
Well, I think it should be covered in insurance or taxes or something. I mean, and that's like they call it. Okay, let's talk about that since you bring that up, the death tax. And
that's
people,
not the same thing, but.
Well, I'm just saying people think that it applies to them.
And it doesn't. Like, oh, it doesn't.
Yeah, they're like
the estate tax. If you're
$150,000 a year, because if you don't, it doesn't apply to you.
If you're listening to this podcast and the thing you're listening to it on is not gold plated and covered in diamonds, then the estate tax doesn't cover you.
Yeah, it's not the death tax, it's the estate tax. Do you have an estate? Then you don't have death tax. You don't have estate tax. It does not apply to you.
If you have to count the number of pools your loved one owns, then the estate tax doesn't affect you. Oh, we could totally do like a you're
actually, if
you might be a redneck if
then you do. it does affect you. But yeah.
No, we could do a totally, you might be redneck if. Like, if you have to count the number of pools your loved one owned, you might be affected by the estate tax.
If your loved one was killed in one of his 7 Ferraris, you might be affected by
With one of his 12 prostitutes.
If you bet on a horse, you're not affected by the death tax. If you own the horse, you might be affected by the death tax.
No, if you bet on a horse, you aren't affected by the estate tax. If you own a horse, you might be affected by the estate tax. If you own the track, then you are affected by the estate tax.
If you are the track, you owed somebody a lot of money.
Then you have converted from a human to an area.
And you paid.
And you might be a character in a Neil Gaiman novel. I was going to say the one experience that I've had. So since getting into bourbon, I've joined a bunch of the online groups, and they're very interesting, I'll say. It's a lot of negative stuff. It's a lot of, dick measuring and just negative shit. But here our local bourbon group here in Iowa on Facebook has been incredibly positive. There are a lot of people that are right wingers on there. There are a lot of people that are left wingers. And we really have created a place. Well, I've joined, I've been a member for a few years, but an area where really everybody is welcome. They push out the politics entirely, which, I like talking about politics, but I also understand the idea of having a space where everybody can talk about one thing and not have to argue about it. I mean, I know there's a lot of people in the group that in other circumstances, we would have much less cordial discussions. And so it really has been kind of nice having one place where there is, we just talk about bourbon. We talk about, did you like this release? Did you like that release? What do you think? What about this new, Hy-Vee or Fairway pick? And that's
because that's why you're in the group. You're
right.
Talking about that.
And it's not people posting pictures of their guns next to their bourbon or their computers or their dick or whatever they put their guns next to, which is everything. So I think that if we can agree on one thing, don't put a gun next to your dick, even if it's for a picture.
Or pointed at it.
Maybe especially if it's for a picture.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody listening to this abbreviated episode that turned into a not abbreviated episode.
Never is.
We thank y'all. Just subscribe, let us know what you think, and everybody have a good night and be safe. Okay.